Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Pod Save Chocolate. My name is Clay Gordon, and I'm your host today. And this is the monthly news and AMA Ask Me Anything episode for the month of April. So before we begin, please, everyone, if you can, while you're watching live, go into the comments and let me know where in the world you are connecting from. And I will get that shout out up on screen. I don't need to know if you're connecting from Facebook, YouTube, or LinkedIn, just where in the world. In the United States, outside the United States, you're connecting in. I'll get that shout out, let everybody know who is participating. And also to remind everybody, and you can see that on the text crawl at the bottom of the screen, this episode of Pod Save Chocolate, like every episode of Pod Save Chocolate, is supported by you, the members of the Chocolate Life. And you can go to the homepage of the Chocolate Life. This is it right here. And you can click on this little green button up here. And if you click on this green button and you are not currently a member, you can become a member of the Chocolate Life. There's always a free membership. But then, of course, there are also premium memberships available, which provide a bunch of perks for joining. And so please go there and help support the work that we do. So that's it. And because this is an AMA episode, you can go into the live chat on YouTube or the comments on YouTube, Facebook, or LinkedIn. And you can ask me a question. You can ask me about any of the news items that I put together, or you can ask me a question about anything, as long as it has to do with cocoa or chocolate. I'm happy to answer all those questions to the best that I can. And with that, let's just jump into today. So here's the post for today's episode. For every episode of Pod Save Chocolate, there is a post, and there is also an archive. So if you click, you can click on episodes 101 plus, and here's every episode of Pod Save Chocolate. Here is a link to the first 100 episodes of Pod Save Chocolate. And before there was Pod Save Chocolate, there was the Chocolate Life Live. And so here is an archive of all of the episodes of the Chocolate Life Live. If you want to go and take a look at any of the topics, we'll go do that. But I just wanted to point out that those things are available. So we'll go and we'll look at today's episode. So every episode begins with an overview, and that overview, or the post for every episode, includes an overview, and that overview includes a sort of run of show. So it's the topics that I want to cover, sort of in the order that I want to cover them. Right? And so you can go and take a look at this, and you can decide, oh, I have a question about this, or I don't care about this, whatever it is you'd like to do. I'm happy to go and talk about them. But the first thing we want to do is we want to talk about the price of cocoa. This is something that I do probably at least once a week. I go take a look, and let's look at the futures price of cocoa. What we do is the price of cocoa, the cash price, today's cash price, is about $8,150 a metric ton, US dollars a metric ton. And you can see what the daily high and low so far. We're looking at intraday trading right now. And then you can take a look at what the futures market is doing. It looks like contracts for May are going to float up a little bit. And then after that, things are going to float down pretty smoothly. The ramp looks like it's smoothly through March of 2027, settling in the upper 6,700, somewhere around $7,000 a ton. So that's what the futures market takes a look at right now. So why do you want to know this? Because if you're a chocolate maker, what you want to do is you want to have an idea about where the price of cocoa is going on the exchange. And so you can perhaps time your sales so that you can take advantage of the prices. But what this says is that 2 years from now, March of 2027, the price of cocoa is going to be double what it was in 2021. So we still haven't gotten anywhere down to the $3,000 a metric ton mark. So even very optimistic projections say that we're going to be here at a price which is roughly double what it has been 2 years ago before the current price spike. So looking at historical prices, this is another. I don't understand why the cookie setting is not properly. What you can do is you can go and take a look at where prices are going. This just gives you a sense of volatility. in a chart kind of way. It's just a real quick way to go and take a look. You may or may not find this valuable, but you can go and take a look at cocoa prices in this particular view all the way back to 2007 before you have to go and load another page. So this is useful just to remind yourself, but perhaps a better way of looking at it is this graph, right? So this graph is going to show you, this is the last year. What has happened is that you can see that there's been this movement right along this. Well, the reason why this line is here is because it's been algorithmically generated to sort of represent where the middle of things are. But you can see that even though there was a recent spike, so let's go take a look at the last 6 months, even though there was a recent spike in the price of cocoa. So here, no, this was a year ago. So here's where we were end of December 2024, mid-December 2024. What we've got is over the course of the last 6 months, we can see this general decline, but with a reasonable amount of volatility. So we get a sense of where the market is going. You can go and take a look at the last month to get a sense of volatility, but along with this chart, what we can do is cocoa futures rose. So yeah, it was down here. All right, closer to 8,000. It's up over 8,400 right now, reaching 1-week highs. Escalating global trade tensions fueled by concerns over rising prices. And tariffs. As part of the current president of the United States trade war, with the U.S. proceeds with a planned 21% tariff on Ivorian goods, which would include cocoa beans, consumably, and derivatives. So liquor, nibs, beans, butter and powder coming from the Ivory Coast. So that's something to consider. There's been a 90-day delay in the implementation of many of these tariffs, but it will be interesting to see what's going to happen to prices if the tariffs are actually implemented the way the current administration says that they are going to be implemented. And it may be that the Ivorian government comes to some deal with the administration, which might exempt cocoa from this, but we shall see. If there is a 20% import tariff on Ivorian cocoa beans, then any chocolate maker that is using Ivorian cocoa bean is going to have an immediate 20% increase on the price of the cocoa beans. And so this 8,000, 20% of 8,400 is what, another $1,600. So it's going to go to it's going to go to $10,000 a ton. Nothing you can do about that. That's on top of whatever it is the market is going. So there's a lot of uncertainty in the marketplace right now, and that's what I want to focus on. There's a lot of uncertainty in the marketplace right now. Now, what we'll see as part of this TLDR that I did here is confidence is high that production will return to something like normal levels, and that is true. Through the March end of harvest in West Africa, that was true. The production looks like it's more than normal. There's about 6 months stock on hand, depending upon how you go. The grinders and big processors say they have 6 months stock on hand. So that's one of the reasons why the prices are drifting downwards, while derivatives remain expensive. And this is a really interesting thing to consider, which is after the price of oil goes up and the price of gasoline goes up with it, when the price of oil goes down, the price of gasoline goes down, but much more slowly. So even though we've seen this decline from 12,000 to 8,500, which is what, not quite a third decline, the price of cocoa butter is still very, very high. And so it is following the traditional metric that, derivatives or processed versions of whatever the commodity is lag very, very slowly behind reductions in the price of the commodity, whereas they follow very, very quickly increases in terms. So we're not going to see any reduction anytime soon in the price of cocoa butter. It's not going to happen, right? And we have to wait to see what U.S. tariff practices are going to do. We know that it's causing uncertainty in the market. It's causing reduced confidence in the market. And so we're even seeing some of the big processors saying that demand from their customers is reduced. So it's really, really important to understand what it is that's going on, not just the micro aspects of it, but the macro aspects of what's going on in the market. Now, one of the things that we've seen, right, is La Nina is over, the exit after 3 week months, right, and so this is one of the things that let me bring this back up. I want to close this, not the it close the login. Is that what this means is while La Nina causes cooler temperatures, raising the chance of floods and droughts affecting crops, the El Nino Southern Oscillation ENSO neutral means that water temperature remains near average, potentially stabilizing crop yields. And this is one of the factors that is going into many people thinking that crop yields are going to stabilize or at least not decline over the next little while. They could be wrong, right? Right. One of the challenges that I have with all of the talk that goes around with the high cost of cocoa and the plans to be able to address the problem, none of them are actually going in and addressing the root cause. I mean, all we need is another weather event coupled with aging farmers and aging farms and to reduce productivity again. And trying to predict the weather that far out is going to be a real challenge. And so there is no, excuse me, I have a cold. There is no guarantee that the futures prices are going to remain what they are. What we are finding with the tariffs, and this may happen um, depending on how things go with cocoa, it looks like the U.S. tariffs haven't had much of an influence on, or the proposed U.S. tariffs haven't had much of an influence on the price of cocoa, whereas they've had huge impact on stock prices. Is that what you find is this is just it's a paradise for traders. If you short sell, knowing that there is a rumor that tariffs are going to be um, tariffs are going to be implemented, the price of things plunge, you short sell, right? You can make money that way. You can buy low, and then when prices go back, you can sell high. There are people who've made an insane amount of money trading on the uncertainty associated with tariffs. But you're a small chocolate maker, you're not a big cocoa trader, you're not a big chocolate processor, so you can't go and take advantage of those things. So wanted to go there. Another thing that we're going to find is this thing about the de minimis exception and what exemption. What this may mean is that if, for example, if you're a chocolate importer and distributor located in the UK and you have a customer here in the United States, right now, if the value of the shipment was less than 800 US dollars, then there are no import duties which need to be collected on that imported shipment. Now, while this is really aimed at large Chinese companies like Timu and Shine to be able to collect duties on all the goods imported that cost less than $800, if you are in fact any company and you're selling and you're shipping a commercial package into the U.S. Uh, if you have a declared value associated, there may be tariffs which are which need to be applied. Now, at the moment, again, if you're an American, you may know that when you come back, you have to declare anything over $800, right? And this is the de minimis exception. So if I've been to a foreign country and I've got less than $800 worth of stuff in my bags, I don't need to pay import duties on it. Whereas if I have more than $800, I do need to pay import duties on the value of things above $800, depending upon what classification those goods fit in, right? But this is designed. But what this will do is it will say any shipment into the United States of chocolate from anywhere, from Canada, from Mexico, from the UK, from Japan, anywhere, right? That would normally be eligible for the de minimis exception. If the current administration gets rid of it, retaliatory again. A lot of it is to try to make some money off the American consumer, because ultimately it's the consumer that pays these tariffs. They're retaliatory and they're punitive, but it's going to have an impact on things. So pay close if you are currently uh, expecting shipments, relatively inexpensive shipments from overseas, as to what the administration is doing with the de minimis exception. If there are similar kinds of policies that go on in other countries, you may find that if you're exporting, you're shipping individual packages, you may find that your stuff is similarly tariffed, which might have an additional impact on your business. So before we go to the other things that I want to talk about, let's get to a question from a listener, which is Jin Kim, which I believe is connecting from California, if I recall properly. Jin, hello, welcome. Have you previously covered the topic of cacao genotypes beyond Criollo, Trinitario, Forastero? Things like CCN51, Arriba Fortunato, etc. still confuses me. I'm sort of wondering if this is sort of a follow-on to last week's episode associated with cocoa grading. And the answer to that question is I probably have, but I may not have done it in exactly the way that you're talking about. So let me jump in and talk about that right now, right? Because I think it makes sense to do so because you asked the question. So it's really important to understand that there are really only two genetic families of cacao, right? They're called clusters. There are two genetic clusters. One is called Criollo, and the other one is called Forastero. And it's also important to know that those are Spanish names that were applied to cacao when the New World was conquered. So Criollo is a term that means from here, as in comida típica y criolla, so typical native food. A criollo means from where I am. And you have to be very careful because, if you're speaking to a cacao farmer in Peru, the cacao farmer in Peru may say, "Oh, I'm growing criollos," and what they mean is patrimonial criollos. My grandfather grew these things, so these are what my abuelo or my abuelito grew, right? So I'm going to call them criollos because they're native. They're from here. That's what I grow, right? As opposed to genetic criollos, right? Which are a different thing entirely. The other category of beans, genetic cluster of beans, is Forastero. And what I will do is I will find a link to the Juan Carlos Motomayor 2008 study and put it into today's episode, which will make this much clearer, right? But within the Forastero category, we find Forastero varieties. I think that's probably the best way to call them, which might be Iquitos, Contamana. These names may sound familiar to you, right? Um, um, and it turns out that the Ecuadorian Nacional, right, is in fact a Forastero in terms of its genetic parentage, right? So Arriba is a term which was applied to a specific place which was well known for its Nacional cacao. It was around Vinces in Ecuador, which is up the Guayas River. And Arriba literally means go up, right? And so if you were looking for the cocoa, if you were a cocoa trader coming into the port in Guayaquil, where's the cocoa? They say arriba, up to Vinces. And so Arriba is a name given to the Nacional Canal. They're not Nacional Canal cacao. They are not synonymous, right? Arriba is associated with a flavor profile, which I think of as sort of orange blossom jasmine, right? But Arriba is different than Nacional specifically. But a Nacional is a Forastero. A Trinitario is in fact a deliberate hybrid between a Criollo and a Forastero. It's called a Trinitario because it happened on the island of Trinidad. In the 1770s, there was a blight. The beans on the island were being devastated by the blight. And so forasteros were imported and then crossbred with the beans on the island to create something which was more disease resistant, but it had a high proportion of Criollo genetics, so it was also considered to be a flavor variety, something that, well, a more flavorful variety. Right. So we find that the Amelinado forastero, which is native probably to what is now Pará in Brazil, was exported into West Africa. So the dominant variety, which grows in Ghana, Ivory Coast, perhaps in Nigeria and Cameroon, right, come from that Amelinado forastero lineage, right? So it's sort of complicated in that respect because we tend to use Trinitario in a very, very loose way. And then it is also the case that some of the um, some of the some of the genetics which would have gone to Grenada, or not to Grenada, to Trinidad, would have come back to Nicaragua. And those Trinitario hybrids would have been bred uh, purposefully or just because cacao trees are pretty promiscuous with the local criollos, right? And what are now sometimes called acriollados. And the acriollado is this mixture of Trinitarios with the local varieties, which are found primarily in Nicaragua, but you'll also find them, I believe, in Honduras and in Guatemala as well. So hopefully that will help you. I mean, Criollo means from here, Forastero means foreign, right, or from afar. And what's sort of weird about that when you think about it is uh, that the high quality genetics and the origin of cacao was foreign. The origin of cacao was down in South America, and it's the foreign, it's the from there stuff. So it's a linguistic thing, not a genetic thing. Although we've been trying to adapt the genetics to the linguistics. So here's what's interesting to know: CCN 51, right, stands for Collection Castro Naranjal. That's the CCN. So the Castro is a breeder by the name of Homero Castro, and sometimes CCN is 50 called. Sometimes it's called Homero, but CCN 51 refers to the 51st crossbreeding. Right, so it's the 51st attempt to create a much more disease resistant, much more productive variety, but there was no focus on flavor at the time. So that's what CCN 51, bred in Ecuador, right? But it consists of um, a, a, a crossing between a Trinitario, a local Forastero, right, and Nacional varieties. So there is some fine flavor component. It's a very, very interesting hybrid. I'm going to go see if I can find the story which talks about what the genetic parentage is. I know that I've looked it up before. I don't know where my copy of that is, but you can find out what the parentage of CCN 51 is. Now, interestingly enough, there's a new set of varieties coming out of Ecuador. They're the EAT. So this is the experimental station. I forget what the other E is, which is part of INIAP in Ecuador. There's a new series, which is the 800 series. And the 800 series is based on CCN 51. But what they've done is they've bred flavor varieties into it. So you get the productivity and disease resistance that you associate with 51, but the flavor that you would associate with a Trinitario. So if you are looking for new beans from Ecuador, then maybe look for the T800 series. I believe the Hacienda Victoria is producing some there. I am certain there are other estates and other farmers in the country that are producing them. So CCN 51, but right. What's important to understand about CCN 51 is that while it has for years suffered from a very poor reputation in terms of flavor, right? What it turns out is that they were fermenting it improperly. And if you do properly ferment it, CCN 51 will produce a bean which is pretty much indistinguishable from a bulk a West African Amelinado Forastero. It's not. It is not as awful as people think it is. If properly fermented, it also happens to have a lot of cocoa butter, so it's a high-fat bean, which means that you need to add less cocoa butter to your recipes. So that's a good thing. It's usually sold at a discount, or it is often sold as a discount. So it might be less expensive than other varieties. And if you're a farmer, right, it is there's a lot of pulp, and it is very sweet, that pulp. And so if you're purchasing cacao juice or cacao juice concentrate or cacao pulp, right, chances are it is from CCN 51. I know that when I was working on Solbeso, excuse me, again, when I was working on Solbeso, in 2015, 2016, we had started off working with Piura Gran Blanco from northern Peru, but it turns out that that was very, very dry. And so we got very, very little pulp that we could use to ferment, very little juice that we could ferment. And when we moved to Ecuador and started working with CCN 51, we ended up, our raw materials cost ended up dropping because there was so much juice and it was so sweet. So there is this balancing act there. But if you are purchasing freeze-dried cocoa pulp or cocoa pulp puree or a juice, chances are it comes from CCN 51. Just if you're curious about that. So Fortunato number 4 is a trademarked term, right? So it refers to what might be called the Peruvian version of Nacional cocoa. So we have Ecuadorian Nacional, we have Peruvian Nacional, there's a Bolivian Nacional. These are genetically distinct varieties, and they come from those countries. The Fortunato number 4 was assigned to this particular bean by Marañón Chocolate, which is named after the valley and the river where these beans were found. Fortunato is the name of a farmer, right? And so it is a trademark term. Fortunato for doesn't refer to genetics specifically. It's just a name that we call things. Now, there's a similar thing going on in Mexico. So internally, if you were to go to INIFAP, which is the agricultural research arm of the Mexican government, in their archive, they have a bean which they call C1. I don't know why it's the C, but it's called C1. But if you were to go to La Jolla, which is where this was originally, I suppose, discovered might be the right word, what they did is they trademarked that bean to be Carmelo. Now, if you don't want to buy it from La Jolla, you call it Carmelo. Or you can't call it Carmelo. If you want to call it Carmelo, you have to buy it from the people who own the trademark on the term Carmelo. Otherwise, you call it C1. Right? Now, it was thought to be a 100% Criollo genetics. That's not entirely true. I went to a conference called Frontiers in Cacao Science back in 2015, I want to say. It was at Penn State University, and one of the things that was presented there is that the C1, the Carmelo, was about 60% Criollo genetics and 40% Forastero genetics, and so everybody, even though it was 100% white bean cocoa, although with a little anomaly, every once in a while there would be these little dark spots in the center of these white beans. We were calling them pintos at the time, and people couldn't understand where these dark spots comes from. But it makes sense if there is a forastero component to the genetics of Carmelo, that under some circumstances of pollination, that some aspects of the forastero parentage would reveal themselves in the bean and these dark spots. But you have to be very careful. Fortunato is not a term for genetics. It's just a trademark term. And anybody can put a trademark name on cocoa if they want to. Now, it's very different from names like Chuncho and Amelinado and an albino bean, an albino forastero, which originates from Brazil, Kutongo. So I know, Jin, you said thanks, right? I think I'm answering the question. Are there more things that you need for me to clear up? one of them I can immediately think of is if you see a variety, it's called SCA, like 67. The SCA stands for Scavina, right? And you might find something like TSH in front of it, means that's Trinidad Standard Hybrid, right? And so if you take a look at what the three-letter abbreviation is, and I don't know that I have a table of those put together. At some time I did have some of them. It's like EET in Ecuador. You'll have different research stations in different countries, which will have these names associated with them. You can find out what collection, so where they were, who is the where the collection was originally put together. So who went out and found them, right, and brought them back and put them into a collection, or where the hybridization was done. Right? So it's important, I think, also to take a look at those abbreviations. And those abbreviations are almost always on the Trinitario hybrids. So, um, um, so consider that as well. So I'm sure the subject of genotypes versus trademark names could be an entire series of podcasts, but this is a good start. There aren't a whole lot of them, as it turns out, Jen. A lot of the so I suppose what we could do is another aspect of this might have to do with denominations of origin. So there is a PDO, a protected designation of origin, which was filed, the World Intellectual Property Organization, WIPO, around the use of the name Chuao. And so Chuao is a designation which is based on a location, right? Um, and so and there is also, I believe, a formal denomination of origin around Ariba, which is not used very much because it turns out to be expensive to get designation, and it's hard to get designation as well. So we do have this set of terms around traditional names, which are based on locations, and traditional attributions, which are not trademarked but are protected. Right. Then we have trademarks, which are which are which are created by a company, which get to applied to a product that they're selling. And then you have the accepted language that is used, which is sometimes based, on location. For example, if we were to look at the Iquitos designation associated with forasteros, is because it's associated with Iquitos, the Iquitos River in Peru. So there is that combination of things. I don't know that I would do an entire episode or series of podcast episodes on this. And I realize that I've been fumbling over this a little bit. But Jen, if there are specific additional questions that you think you want clarity about, let me know. I know you've emailed me as well. You can put them in the comments to the post. If you are a member of the Chocolate Life, after this is over, you can go down to the bottom and there's a member discussion. So you can ask me a question or follow up afterwards in the discussion. And I'd be happy to go and take a look at that. Right. So I think that's enough about this topic for this episode. It is, I think there are some commercial aspects to it. There are certainly, some beans get value just because they come from some places, and some beans have lowered value because they have some names associated with them. But it's really important to know that not all criollos make good chocolate. Right? Not all genetic criollos make good chocolate. I mean, you still have to be a really good chocolate maker in order to take these beans and express the flavor in an interesting kind of way. And there are beans which have been considered to be bulk commodity beans that you can do a good job of fermentation and create really, really interesting chocolate with them. And so there are some commercial aspects to it, which will have an impact on price, but I think it's less relevant the more it gets less relevant the more we know, if I can say. When there were just 3 varieties, or maybe four. Like when I started, we would say there are only Criollos, Forasteros, Trinitarios, and then Nacionals crept in. When there were only the four, it made a difference. But now that our understanding is much more complex, it's less of an issue. Um, and the Venezuelan government has done a really, really bad job about protecting the word Chuao. Um, One of the things the denomination document doesn't cover, are we talking about Chuao Village or Chuao Valley? And so for many, many years, Venezuela was exporting more Chuao, right? That would fit under the designation of origin because it was coming from the valley and not the village. So if you're going to do something like a PDO, which requires the intervention of the government has to be um, on top of it. I mean, it's like a patent, it's like a trademark. If you don't engage in protecting it actively, you can lose it or you can lose control of it, and that's what's happened with Chuao. Right. So there's a lot of stuff. Again, Jin, if there's more you want to know about this topic, I'd be happy to address specific questions that you might have. And if anybody else has another question about it, a question about this topic or any other topic, um, I can go and take a look at it. So what I also want to do is I have a Google alert which is set up, and I'm going to do a Google alert on chocolate. And it turns out that, man, when I do this Google alert, it's not very interesting right now. Right? We have Marks and Spencer, right? Oh, wow, they're going to start selling quote unquote Dubai style chocolate in their stores. That's not all that interesting. So I don't know what the PVC is, but there's a Student Artworks for an annual chocolate chowdown event. Not going to join to them. So Barry Callebaut faces a perfect storm. So here's actually what I will do is I will take the link to this and put it in the post for today. It's from Fortune, but it talks about how raw materials costs and the tariff turmoil have derailed sales and delayed cost-cutting plans for Barry Callebaut. Interesting thing we can do. The healthiest chocolate eggs, I think that's an oxymoron. Um, how the high cost of cocoa is hampering Easter Bunny sales, right? So if you are interested, you can get this as set up Google alerts. And if you want to, you can also go and come on. Oh, I'm looking for something here and I don't find it. So I'm going to join someplace else. I was looking for another news feed, which I get from Google. So didn't want to show you too much of the inbox from my email account. So you can get this information. It's not terribly interesting at the moment in terms of general news around chocolate. But as I say, there are one or two things that I just saw that showed up in the last hour or two. But I use Google alerts, some of them, very, very specific. So I have one on my name, right? So I have one on the International Cocoa and Chocolate Forum, one on Tony's Chocolonely, because, it's also interesting. One of the things that happened, Tony's, is that I don't understand why this is here, but there have been a couple of recent recalls. Here we go. Tony's Chocolonely recalls. Right. So why would Tony Chocolonely be doing a recall where that's happening? It's not in the chocolate that is made for them by Barry Callebaut. That chocolate is shipped to plants in the Netherlands, where the chocolate is then deposited into bars with inclusions. And so if there are recalls about stones or things like that, it's almost certainly in the process of depositing the bars with the inclusions, nothing to do with the chocolate itself. So it's 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 a rabbit trail that you can go down, and I do that rabbit trail for you on occasion. So things to know about that. Um, Something to consider. This is something that's been showing up on the Chocolate Life for the last month or so. Is that there is an historic retail location across from Harvard University, just within a short distance from Harvard Yard. And what they're looking to have is somebody take over a retail location. So this is where it is. Here's Harvard Yard over here, but they have a space inside when this is what that space inside looks like. And it's if you wanted to set up a little chocolate shop inside, it's there. The information about this is linked today. But here's an interesting thing that you might want to consider because they're not doing long-term lease. Um, we've got Mother's Day coming up, and we've got graduation, which is happening in May. So this would be a really, really interesting opportunity for a pop-up, right, to determine whether this is something that you might be interested in doing. Now, it is a flat fee. It includes utilities. There's a window display, but um, they're not going to provide people to staff the space for you. So you have to staff it yourself. But this is what it looks like, right, ready to go, and you can set it up. So if you're interested in having sort of a small retail location for your stuff in Boston, in Cambridge, um, in a in a in a in a in a an historic location. I mean, this store, Levitt and Pierce, has been in this location for 140 years since it was founded. Um, and it gets lots of walk-by traffic, and there are lots of special events which happen in the Harvard area. And you want to check it out. The information to connect with the owner of the space is in the post, and you can go take a look at that. So, but if you need more information, put it in the comments, and I will go and let you know about that. I think it's newsworthy because even though the cost of chocolate or the cost of cocoa beans is high, this is the time to start spending money to figure out how to expand your sales, right? And if you do not currently have a retail location and you're interested, this would be a way to get a move-in ready real location, lots of volume, traffic volume. It's a destination, and there's lots of walk-by traffic, relatively inexpensively. So I would go, and I think it's newsworthy because it represents an opportunity to grow your business. A couple of festival updates. First one of which is Le Marché du Chocolat. This is what the last year's craft chocolate experience has morphed into. It's now a hotel ballroom show. It is mostly about it appears mostly to be about this programming, but there are these experiences which are buffet. So it's Mother's Day weekend, and so I think one of the primary attractions is if you want to do something associated with chocolate with um, your mother or aunt or some other important woman in your life, this could be an interesting thing to do. It's across from Union Square, but one of the things which is really sort of um, concerning to me is it looks like they might only have 6 exhibitors. It's maybe 7 with Dandelion, but it's hard to know for the exhibit component, which happens on both days, if there are going to be enough merchants to make it really, really interesting for people. However, if you are in San Francisco and they do this, Tandy Peterson, Embers Chocolate, I know Tandy. She's been featured on an episode of Pod Safe Chocolate. She is the only master in the Craft Chocolate Challenge, which means she's won awards in 3 years. She does great work. So if you are in San Francisco, you do plan to go. Although I don't know that it's worth the entry fee just for one chocolate maker. It'll be interesting to see. So go and take a look at this to find out how many other merchants have signed up. If it's only 6 and we're 6 weeks out, less than 8 weeks out. That's not a good sign. Anyway, so coming up in Istanbul is the Salon du Chocolat. I understand this is a business to business version, but that's coming up very shortly. And then in April, actually in a couple of weekends, we have the DC Chocolate Festival. So if you're in the Washington, D.C. area, this is a festival that you can catch um, in the area. I believe it is at the French Embassy. So, right, and good people who organize it, and there should be a lot of interesting things going on there. Before I get to this last pre-programmed topic, which is thoughts about using Beanstalker, what I want to do is talk about some news which is important to me. and important to the chocolate life. The first one is I'm doing a little bit of cleanup, right, on the homepage. Um, and one of the things that I am also doing is I have reopened the Chocolate Life forums, right? So you do need to do a separate sign up. I haven't been able to get single sign on. What I will do, if you're currently a member of the Chocolate Life, please use the username, the email address that you're using for your Chocolate Life account, for the forums account. Um, right? If you are not currently a member, what you can do is you can go click, if you're not logged in, it will say create account. And you click on create account and you'll be able to set up an account. It's easy to do. It's free, right? And once you have set up an account, um, what you'll find is that the forums have been reopened. I think importantly, there's a new classified forums, which you can just go and publish the forum. You don't need to wait for me to do it. There's no fee to do it. I'd like to limit classifieds here for anything under $1,000. If you want it over $1,000, we'll do it on the Chocolate Life. I have no way to enforce it. Go and use this however you want. But we also have the technical help forum. So if you have a question, right, tech help trips, if you have a question or you have a technique you want to share, you can go into this forum. And what will happen is that I will use the Chocolate Life as my blogging platform, even though if you were to go to my profile and were to go take a look at my blog, um, I do have blog post here. I'm not going to be blogging on the forum site. I'm going to be blogging on the Chocolate Life. But you can go and sign up for the Chocolate Life forums now at no charge, and and just go to it. You can ask and answer questions. What my experience is that the community which is a part of this is a little more it's a little more concentrated, a little more focused, a little more knowledgeable than the people that you'll find, for example, on Reddit or some random forum somewhere, right? And I get notified of every new post, and so to the extent that I'm able to answer any questions, I will answer the questions here on the Chocolate Life forums. Now, I do moderate all new signups. So you have to wait after you sign up for me to go approve it. Yes, right. I will do that. This is just because one of the reasons why I closed it down is just a lot of spam in memberships, and I want to make sure that doesn't happen all over again. So this is now there. I've got some updates that I need to do. It's a work in progress, but it is in fact open right now for new memberships. And I've already had a couple of signups in the week that it has been open. So I'm looking forward. I'm looking forward to more of them. Um, so let's talk about the final thing that I wanted to talk about. Here's this post about Beanstalker. Uh, I'm currently logged in. And so if you were to I could go to my profile and I could show you all of the bars that I rated for the Craft Chocolate Challenge. But I don't want to go there. What I want to do is I want to go and take a look um, at just some random bar that I haven't reviewed yet, or maybe I want or. All right, so let's go pick this one. Now, because it's renew, even though I have already reviewed it, for some reason the software doesn't know I have already reviewed it when I go from this entry point. So when I go from the bars to review the bar, even though I'm logged in, it doesn't know that I've already reviewed it. If I want to do that, I have to go to my profile and select the bar from my profile and say update. Right? And so just these are mechanics. I'm sure that Steph, who is the woman who's running this out of Australia, who's created this out of Australia, hasn't really thought some of these things through. And this is the first time that there have been, I need to sit down and review like 57 chocolate bars, back to back to back. And so there are elements of the navigation and there are elements of things which have not been thought through from that point of view. It's like, I'm going to review a bar today, and then maybe I'll review a bar a week from now, and then review a bar from some other point. But what I do want to suggest is that even if you are a quote unquote certified taster, right, from some other program, that going here and thinking about how you might take what it is that you've been taught from a certification program and map it into this format is going to be useful to you. Because I think that one of the things, I'm not, I think that one of the things that I learned a long time ago is that, and this is early in my tech career, is that if you're talking about something which is as complicated or complex or nuanced as flavor, that having a bunch of different ways to talk about the flavor is really, really important. Right. So if you've only thought about it from one point of view, this is the way I'm taught, this is the way I'm going to do it, you're missing, I think, some nuance. And so there is a lot of value in going through another process and then seeing how your one process maps onto another and vice versa. Now, so for example, for me, in taking a look at this, is for the last couple of years for the Craft Chocolate Challenge, we've been using paper forms. And the paper form provides a lot of flexibility. Well, we've been doing it not paper forms, but Microsoft Word documents or Pages documents. But the form provides us with a lot of flexibility in terms of you know moving things around or jumping back and forth between sections and thinking about how we want to organize the way we enter our assessments of what we're doing. And in this particular case, what has happened is the Craft Chocolate Challenge judging rubric has been added as a third page. So the normal page on Beanstalk or the normal review has two pages, this one and another one, right? And I'm not going to show you the Craft Chocolate Challenge rubric. It's the middle page. But to some extent, they're asking similar kind of information in a different kind of way. They're asking for different information. And so for me, one of the really, really interesting challenges of judging for the Craft Chocolate Challenge, which I finished yesterday, by the way, and I will be working with Dustin to do an awards program very, very shortly. I think the judging should be done this weekend. So hopefully we'll get all that done. We'll have Stephanie just download all the data from the database, and so Dustin will be able to. It's in spreadsheet form, and so he can do all the tabulation very, very quickly. That's one of the reasons why we wanted to use the Beanstalker form. But it's worthwhile. I ended up changing my approach to how I entered the data into this. So the order that I was entering the data so I changed the way I thought about the review process, right? At least three different times. So there's the first day's worth of bars and the second day's worth of bars. And then I did 3 days, and then I took some time off because I went to New York for the Salon de Chocolat, came back. And then when I came back, I had a chance to think about it, and I just slightly differently, and then I changed again. And that's really, really, really interesting. And that's why I want to suggest that whatever approach you have learned, right, that what you do is you think about um, using this format as a way of exploring other ways to think about rating and reviewing chocolate, talking about chocolate, and how you would fit your particular narrative about how to do it, the way you approach how to do this, into some other format that somebody else has created for you. It's fascinating. It is fascinating. For me, it has. I've had to I've had to rethink the entire process, which I had to do. So when I was using the International Chocolate Awards judging form, there was a certain way of doing it, and you would go through the order, and then when I was doing the Premio Bean de Bar Brazil, there was a certain order, and it had familiarities which were similar to the International Chocolate Awards, but it was very, very different. And mapping one onto the other and thinking about how you would ask or answer the questions was always quite fascinating. And this is what happened here. This is a very, very different approach. Uh, I understand that the International Chocolate Awards now uses the IICCT sort of flavor thing, and so there are flavor suggestions now as part of the judging process. But go take a look at this wheel. Oh, it's interesting. One of the things that's interesting is you see that I can type in a flavor like coffee, right? Right? And then I can pick coffee and add it to the list, right? Or what I can do is I can go down here and I can pick from the flavors that are here. Apart from, little misspelling, vegetal is misspelled. Go and look through this, right? And ask yourself how this works for you. I mean, it is a particular way of thinking about it, right? And what's interesting to me is, number one, there are no defects here. Now, there is a page where you can list defects, but I would prefer that I pick the defects from this, or use a wheel like this for defects in order to be able to put them someplace else in order to do it. Um, this is, it is, Steph put this together. I don't know where she got it, but there's some really, really interesting issues. Which, for example, if we look at this dark sugars thing, I don't know that I can reliably differentiate between, Demerara sugar and, I mean, I think Panella or Jaggery, I could probably differentiate from Demerara, but Demerara and Muscovado, I don't know that I could go and do that. And maple is not here as a sugar, and so what I find myself is when I is retreating towards the center. So I have very, very general ideas here, and then moving towards more specific as I go to the outside. This is the way we want to do it anyway. But it's been interesting, the sort of level of black treacle. I mean, black treacle. Why is not black treacle in here? I mean, regular golden syrup. I mean, maybe golden syrup is different from treacle. I mean, I know that I can go to a store and buy golden syrup and treacle, at least but I don't know how they're different. And so it's really, really interesting to think about. I have the cranberry flavors, but how come currants and grapes are in the cranberry, right? How come, there's not? How come, is a currant a berry? I don't. And how come it's not over here in the berry aisle, stone fruit? It's really, really interesting to think about how you would organize or reorganize or think about these flavors and what flavors are missing, and whether you think that they make sense as sensory attributes. Right? So one of the things that you can do, right, is you can go to the next page and you're given the opportunity to list any additional flavors. But there's no way to click flavors from. You can't click on a flavor in here and put it into here, which makes sense. I'm not certain why it's here if I can't click on it and put a flavor in there. But I do suggest that what you go do is go take a look, right, at the list of flavors that are here, um, and go think about how you might construct a flavor wheel and how you think about flavors in this context. It's really, really fascinating to me. Um, it's been challenging for me to do this because it has required me to rethink the way I go and taste things, and so that's good because reframing things and thinking about them in different ways is always a good thing. It gets you out of your comfort zone. It makes you think about things in very, very different ways. So I do recommend sign up for a Beanstalker account, go and add a bar, and go and review it and review other bars and think about the process and how it works for you and how and see if it changes the way you think about rating and reviewing chocolate bars, because I think it will. And I think that's a good thing. And so even if you have got a certification in some method, go and do this. All right. A couple of other things. Again, I will go and update the navigation. It's a week from Sunday, so it's Sunday the 20th is the monthly AMA all member call, which is a Google Meet call where it lasts 90 minutes, starts at 11 o'clock Pacific Daylight Time, Mountain Standard Time. If you're a member, I'll be sending out the monthly member email over the weekend or on Monday. And so the invitation and the date will be there, as along with all the other things that I put in the monthly member newsletter. Uh, and and that's about it for today. Lots of stuff going on that I want to thank everybody for joining me here today, and continue the conversation in the comments on the post on the Chocolate Life. Again, if you're not a member of the Chocolate Life, please go there, because this episode of Pod Save Chocolate, like all episodes of Pod Save Chocolate, is sponsored by the members, right? And I can't do this without your support. And I've been doing it since January of 2008. And I'm looking forward to doing it for another 17 years. That would be pretty cool. And with that, I want to say thank you to everybody. Have a great weekend. And remember that if you're working with chocolate and you're not having fun, you might want to reconsider your life choices, because you're doing it wrong. Until the next time, everybody, ciao.